Today we are talking about 10 ways that I am taking control of my health this fall. For those of you who have been here for a little while, you know that I have been on something of a health journey, and that really kicked off when I did a winter arc last fall. This year it really seems like it's the great lock-in of 2025. Last year it was the winter arc, but if you are not familiar with these trends, the goal of them is really to take advantage of the last quarter of the year to develop and build really great habits going into the new year so that you are not starting everything on January 1st. And that's really what my winter arc was last year. It was about sustainable and reasonable and actual sane goals and habits that I would be able to continue indefinitely. And I've had some successes over the last year. I've had a lot of failures. And so today I really wanted to sit down and reevaluate, check in on where I'm at, and talk about 10 things that I'm going to be doing this fall to really continue this journey and make sure that I'm going into 2026 in just a little bit better shape, a little bit healthier, and a little bit more on track with my goals. So with that, let's get started. Number one is that I am tracking my food with a focus on macros and nutrients. I have been tracking my food somewhat over the last year and mostly paying attention to calories. I haven't wanted to be in a huge calorie deficit, but I did want to very gradually lose a little bit of weight. I just wanted to be a little bit more dialed in with what I was eating too. Like, I really felt like I just had no idea what my portions were anymore. And tracking was just a nice little reset. Even if it's not something you are going to do every day for the rest of your life, even if you just think, okay, I'll do this for a week just to see, like, am I roughly in, the amount of calories that my body, that someone my size needs? Am I getting enough fiber? Those kinds of questions, I think even just tracking for a week or tracking a couple days a week can be a really good gut check. Doing it inconsistently is still a lot better than just not doing it at all and being like, oh, well, it's so overwhelming and I don't want to count calories for the rest of my life. I hear you. I have no plans to track my calories for the rest of my life. And I think what's really helped me is that just in the last few weeks, and what I'm hoping to focus on more for the rest of 2025, is focusing on macros and focusing on nutrients. So for me specifically, I want to make sure that I am hitting a protein goal every day. So I realized I was falling way short on protein. So it made sense why I was hungry all the time, because I just wasn't getting nearly enough in that category. And I wouldn't have known that until I started tracking at least a little bit, even here and there. And then a couple other things that I'm really focused on right now are fiber. I usually hit that goal pretty easily because I just eat a ton of fruits and veggies and whole grains. Whereas the protein, I feel like it's my full-time job trying to hit my protein goal every day. And while fiber is a little easier for me, I find that when I start to fall out of my good habits and, maybe I'm eating out a little bit more, or I'm just being a little bit lazier with making sure that I have veggies and fruits throughout the day, then the fiber does start to slide. And so it is something I still want to keep an eye on. The other thing that I am monitoring is also my iron intake, because I found out last year that I am very iron deficient. I have been trying to remedy this for the last 8 or 9 months. And I feel like it has been so valuable for me to actually track my food. For the first few months, I was starting to supplement with iron, and I was trying to think about, consuming more foods with iron and making sure I was getting it with vitamin C as well. But at the end of the day, I still was not tracking my food consistently. I still was not monitoring how many milligrams of iron I was consuming every day, which for me, someone who is, in a severe state of deficiency and really needed to ramp up my iron a lot, should have been a top priority. And so that is something I'm taking super seriously right now. I just got some blood work done again recently that shows that while my iron levels have improved a little bit, they hadn't improved nearly as much as I wanted. And so I am taking this as a top priority right now. I am tracking my food, not because I want to be obsessive about calories and not because I want to be eating 1,200 calories a day. It is about making sure I'm getting enough protein, enough fiber, enough iron, enough of the things that I need to fuel myself and be functional, because none of these other goals on my list can really happen if I'm anemic. So getting this right is really, really, really important. And I've had some mixed feelings about tracking calories in the past, but I think just really framing it from the lens of health and wellness has really made me have a much more positive relationship with it. It makes me, excited to log into my Fitness Pal every day because now I'm looking at my fiber and seeing if I'm hitting my iron goal. And it feels gamified in a way that feels much healthier than when I was obsessing about trying to eat less than 1,500 calories a day. Number 2, I am eating the same things over and over again. I had forgotten that when I initially lost, 25, 30 pounds about, maybe almost 20 years ago now, and I kept it off for a really long time. I forgot that one of the best things I did was that I just found my go-to meals and I stuck with them. And even if it sounds a little boring, this is one of the easiest hacks to success, because having to constantly meal plan different things and having to constantly track all of the calories in those different things, it becomes tedious, it becomes exhausting. It makes it so that you don't want to track calories. If you are eating more or less the same things every day or, on rotation, it also reduces your need to aggressively calorie count, because you always know your breakfast is going to kind of be like around 400 calories, for instance. You always know that you're going to be getting, like 30 grams of protein with your breakfast. It takes all of the mental math and decision making and decision fatigue and overwhelm out of the equation. The main thing with getting healthy is just to make things as easy as possible. Is it a little boring sometimes? Yes, but there are ways of mitigating that. And that's why I love things like eggs for breakfast, because you can make them a million different ways. Sometimes I will have a couple eggs hard-boiled with a piece of toast. Sometimes I will do a couple eggs scrambled and do them in like little tortillas with salsa. Sometimes I will do a fried egg on avocado toast. I'm mixing and matching, but basically just always making sure that I'm hitting around 25 grams of protein. There's probably going to be eggs involved. There's probably going to be some kind of healthy carb, and I can just mix and match as I need to. Sometimes I have some avocado, sometimes I have a little bit of cheese. But essentially now I know all of these meals well enough that I know they're all going to come in kind of around the same number of calories, and it reduces my need to track them so closely. And it also means that I know much more confidently that I'm going to hit my nutrient goals from step one. And you can do that for a couple weeks and then you switch it up. Like I will go through stretches where I'm just doing eggs a lot, then I will go through a phase where I'm doing yogurt bowls. Maybe I'm doing a smoothie with Greek yogurt and protein powder. Again, just kind of mixing and matching, but the premise is the same. You're always going to be kind of hitting the same calories, macros. And if you are someone who is content eating the same thing over and over again, great. Like your life is going to be so much easier. Number 3 has been actually getting my blood work done and taking supplements intentionally. So again, that is a journey that I started towards the end of last year, but now I am taking it so seriously. I'm going to go back and get my iron rechecked in a few months just to see if what I'm doing is actually working. I'm also planning on getting a vitamin D test in the winter. I have tested deficient in this before, but I am trying to get ahead of that and get as much sunlight as I can right now and start supplementing with vitamin D now before we start losing a lot of sunlight. And then I will do my blood work to see if what I'm doing is actually effective, or if I need to make some tweaks and maybe increase my vitamin D supplementation or take different forms of vitamin D. Like I said earlier, so many of these other things on the list don't really matter if I'm not getting enough vitamin D, magnesium, calcium, iron. So many things are impacted, like if you don't get enough vitamin D. So I really want to take this super seriously and get it right, and getting my blood work done every 3 to 6 months as needed. Number 4 is slowly increasing my steps. This seems like such an obvious one, but there is a reason it is so repeated. Like if there is one thing you can do for your health that is so simple, so easy, so accessible to most people, it's just get more steps in. And I have been actively working on this since last fall. When I started in October of 2024, my average steps for the day were 6,693 steps, which actually I didn't think was a terrible baseline as someone who works fully remotely. But for me, someone, who has always lived in cities and who has previously had daily steps well above 10,000. Like when I lived in New York, I think I easily hit 12 to 15,000 steps a day. 7,000 didn't feel particularly high. And I also noted that none of that walking was higher intensity. So I wanted to do a couple things. One, I just wanted to slowly increase the actual number of steps. And so now my average steps per day for all of 2025 are 8,274. So I have on average increased my daily steps by about 1,500. And I have also made sure that I'm adding in at least a little bit of higher intensity walking. The reason I did that is because most of my walks are with my dog, which makes sense. But much as I love her, she's a very sniffy girl. All she wants to do is walk 2 steps and then stop for 30 seconds. So while it is still good to get steps in, it's good to be active and get outside, I wouldn't exactly call it exercise. And so I wanted to make sure that I was at least getting, even if it was just 10 minutes a day, getting at least a little bit of higher intensity walking. And so that is something I have introduced over my lunch breaks. I'm going out for a 10 or 15 minute walk. I leave Lexi at home so that I can go out and actually do a much faster paced walk. And I will often knock out somewhere from like 1 to 1.5 kilometers. And again, that's something that's easy enough to knock out in 10 or 15 minutes. Like, I'm not talking about going out for an hour-long walk. The whole point is to make this super easy, just something that is super easy to slot in your day. And for you, if it's doing it first thing in the morning, if it's doing it immediately after work, wherever it is that you can almost just like nudge it into your existing schedule, do that. And then also do not underestimate the power of adding in all those little things throughout the day. I mean, I feel like that's such tired advice at this point, the like, oh, park a little further away, but like I am doing all of those things. I'm like taking extra steps when I can. Sometimes I will cross the street and then come back just so that I am getting, like whatever it's going to be, 50 extra steps, 100 extra steps. And all of those things really have been adding up because I have increased my steps by about 1,500 a day without even noticing. Like, I don't feel like I'm particularly more active, but I know I am. And like, I know that I am in objectively better shape now than I was at this time last year, and I attribute that largely to walking. Number 5 is adding in workouts that make sense for where I'm at. I am chronically ill. I do have quite a few mobility issues, and so it really means that most workouts don't work for me. I cannot go for a run. I cannot do a lot of jumping. There are some things I can do in very small doses, but as soon as it turns into like a 45-minute long workout where it's like do 200 squats, like, I'm not going to be able to do that. And so it's a little frustrating because most workouts on YouTube and things like that are not really accessible to me. And so I have had to be really thoughtful about building exercise back into my routine, making sure that it is something that is at my level. If the main priority here is to take care of my health, then that means also taking care of my autoimmune illness and not trying to force myself to do workouts that are just too much for me right now. And so this has created a lot more additional work for me to figure out what kinds of workouts I can do. But if you are in a similar situation, like, carve out the time. You need to sit down and actually write out, like, what kinds of moves can you do? What kind of workouts are accessible to you? Create your own. Like, at this point, I have literally created a list of about like 25 to 30 exercises that I will do in like sets so that I can do days of strength training where I can do a 20-minute workout. And all of the moves are things that I know that I can do. And so because I know it is built for me at my level, and the steps are already all mapped out, it makes it way easier. Like, before, I would just be so overwhelmed. And then I would scroll through YouTube for half an hour trying to find a workout that I could actually do. And then before you know it, I'm tired and I'm over it and I'm like frustrated and I'm just like, oh, I'm not going to do it. So carving out the time when you have it on a weekend, if you have some PTO, like, actually come up with your fitness plan, put it into your Google Calendar, put it in your notes app where you're going to have this go-to thing. And even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm not kidding you. A lot of my workouts are like 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long. Again, it's kind of like with the tracking my food and focusing more on macros and nutrients and calories. I'm having the same mindset with fitness. It's more about mobility and functionality than weight loss. The goal is to make sure that I'm getting some weight-bearing activity because I'm a woman in my late 30s now, and it is really important to make sure that I am getting some kind of resistance training. As you age, you really need to make sure you're prioritizing this kind of movement to make sure that you stay functional and mobile as you age. And again, it makes it so much easier to do it when you're doing it for that reason and thinking about, oh my gosh, I want to be able to get up and walk around and be independent as I continue to age. That, to me, at least, feels so much more motivating than trying to do it to achieve a particular aesthetic or to attain some level of weight loss. Even when I was much thinner, I was so miserable with how I looked. So now that I'm really just focusing on wellness, it feels like it's much easier to do. And it also means that, you're much more likely to do those 5 or 10 minute increments, because doing something for 5 minutes every day or most days is a lot better than doing a 45-minute workout like once every 2 weeks. So it's really just about building the habit. If all I can do is 5 minutes and I get into my workout clothes and I get started and like that's all I feel like doing, that's fine. But most of the time I find that I can keep going, which if you're supplementing that with, getting in your steps and getting in lots of walking, then that's fantastic. And you are probably now officially much more active than the average person in the US or Canada. Number 6 is having a hobby that uses my hands. So I play guitar and I also knit, especially going into the colder months. I definitely want to take up knitting again. That is usually a pretty seasonal thing, and I tend to do it a lot more in the fall and winter. The reason I say have a hobby that uses your hands is because I find this a much more effective strategy than trying to do anything specific with reducing my screen time. I've found that it's actually been much more powerful for my wellness and for my screen time to make sure I have a hobby that involves not being on my phone. So as much as I love all of the other little things that I do on my phone, I create content. I also do things like Duolingo on my phone. I do the New York Times crossword on my phone. I have those things that are like not doom scrolling, but they are still screen time. And I think it's just so important to have something you can do that is not on a screen, even if it's for like 15 minutes a day, even if it is just like knitting a couple rows of a scarf, just something tactile. You are using your hands for, you are looking at what you are doing. You are not looking at a screen for once, probably in like your entire day, especially if you are someone who works at a desk as well. Then you are also staring at a computer all day, and then you are staring at your phone the rest of the day. Just having something else you can do that you love, and it can be cooking or baking, it could be knitting or crochet, embroidery, it could be sports. And I find that if you have something like this that you really, really love, you just kind of end up getting drawn to that rather than spending time on your phone. And I feel like that is more effective than just being like really hard on yourself and being like, oh, your screen time was 7 hours. That's like, you need to get it down. No, just set yourself up in a way where there are other things you want to do instead. Because admittedly, like my screen time is atrocious, but I have found that all of the things I've done to reduce my screen time have been pretty ineffective. The main thing that has actually worked a little bit is 1, spending time with my loved ones more, 2, being outside more, and 3, having a physical hobby. So if anything, I would say focus on just doing those, and then the lowered screen time will follow. Number 7 is just sleep, 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 like focusing on sleep, and I am prioritizing it above almost anything else. I am a terrible sleeper. I have insomnia. So even over the last couple weeks, I've been going through a really bad time. It is not uncommon for me to sleep like 3 hours, 4 hours, but I am becoming so much more rigid with myself about sleep routines. If I am dealing with insomnia, making sure that I am like going back to bed when I can, taking an hour nap. Even if you are a terrible sleeper, it's trying to get the sleep in when you can. It's trying to improve your sleep hygiene a little bit. It's trying new things that you haven't tried before. If it's taking magnesium before bed, just anything you can do to prioritize your sleep, do it. Number 8 is that I am focusing on somatic tracking instead of meditation. If you are not familiar with somatic tracking, it's something that I actually think emerged initially to help people with reprocessing pain, essentially to indicate to your body that it is safe, that it doesn't need to be like constantly scared about being in pain, and just kind of trying to like turn down the dial on the constant like fight or flight feelings that you're experiencing, especially if you are in pain a lot of the time, and then you become anxious about being in pain, and then that can cause more pain. But somatic tracking more broadly, or at least like my interpretation of this, I am not a professional, I'm not a therapist, go do your own research, but I've essentially interpreted it as like a way of feeling my feelings. So I do use it for chronic pain as well, but I also just use it more to dial into like how I'm feeling. So I remember for the longest time, I did not understand what people meant when they said, feel your feelings. I was like, I don't know what that means. As someone who really intellectualized my feelings, I could talk a lot all day about what I think, but I couldn't really talk about how I felt. And when a therapist or somebody would ask me, well, like, how does that feel? Or where do you feel that in your body? I was very disconnected from that. And it's only really been in doing somatic therapy that I've actually come to understand what all of this means. And so I'm focusing more on those somatic practices now than I am on meditation or than I am on journaling, which are all things that I have struggled to do in the past. And they just didn't really click with me. Like I always felt like I was forcing myself to do them. I just don't really care about journaling. Meditation I have had more of a positive relationship with, but even still, it always just felt like this really tedious, like big thing that I had to gear myself up to do. Doing like a little somatic exercise feels way more accessible to me. Sometimes I will just like wake up in the morning and while I'm still in bed, I will just do like a quick body scan and just be like, are you like feeling anything in any part of your body? And then if I do, it's just kind of like observing it and being like, okay, well, what's that about? It's great. And I find it way more accessible than meditation. Again, this is just my application of it. And I've been doing somatic therapy and working with a therapist who specializes in this kind of therapy for quite some time. So of course, read up on it, do your research. But yeah, for me, this has just been something that I have found is much more accessible in that like I actually want to do it and much more helpful. It has actually reduced my pain a lot more than meditation ever has. It has actually increased my emotional well-being much more than anything else has. It has made me much more securely attached and better in my relationships. So for me, somatic tracking is like one of the best ROIs that I could possibly get. Number 9 is building micro habits. And I have talked about this so much on this channel, but I do a little habit tracker. It's just like a really nice way of building micro habits, adding little things in your day. So even kind of along the lines of what I was just saying in the previous one is that, you know, a lot of the reason I didn't want to sit down and meditate is because I always felt like I had to sit down and meditate for like 20 minutes. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to sit there in silence for 20 minutes. It's like, okay, if that's too much, can you sit in a chair and take 3 deep breaths? Like, yes, you can do that. That should feel way more accessible. And so habit formation is really almost about tricking yourself by making the task so easy that you like have to do it. You have no choice but to do it because it's like, yeah, of course I can sit down and like take a deep breath, obviously. So then you do it. And then you are building these more positive habits. And that is really how I've done everything over the last year. And what I'm really going to focus on doing in the next couple months is continuing to build micro habits into my day and also to habit stack. So it'll be things like, okay, I make my coffee every morning. If while I'm waiting for my coffee to brew, maybe you do like 20 squats really quick, or you do a couple laps around your kitchen. It's one, just making things small enough so that it's very doable. And then 2, stacking it onto things that you already do every day. So I'm really going to focus on these 2 things for the rest of the year and hopefully just increase my steps even more, make sure that I'm getting more exercise, eating better, like just because I'm doing a little bit more of those micro habits. Finally, number 10, I'm doing a little mini health challenge for the month of November. As much as I think that most of our health changes should be like small, bite-sized, really sustainable, because what's the point if it's not something you can, continue to do? I also think there can be some benefit in doing, little sprints sometimes, just to like build motivation, build discipline, reinvigorate you, excite you about your goals again. And I think that's something where I do see a lot of positive effect from things like 75 Hard is that like, that's not even a physical challenge, right? Like the whole point of that challenge is to build the mental toughness. And I think having, this defined period of time and you have this community of other people you're doing it with. And I think all of that can be really invigorating and it can be a really good jump start if you are trying to lose weight or improve your health. So I'm doing my own little custom health challenge in November. I'm happy to talk about it more on the channel if you're interested, so let me know in the comments. But essentially, I am creating my own customized one because I am chronically ill and have terrible ADHD, and I'm just like, I can't do 75 Hard. There's no way. Like, it's just not physically possible, but I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm just creating my own. I'm creating my own little fitness and health challenge. I think it will be a really good way to fight the blues as we go into like the darker, colder season here. Our winters are really tough. And so I think just being proactive about that, doing anything you can to keep your mood up and keep your discipline up at that time of year is a really positive thing to do. I also think it sets some really good groundwork going into the holidays, which, typically can be a time of year where we are all more sedentary, drinking more, eating more than we normally would. So I think having a health challenge leading into that can actually be just kind of like a nice segue into the holidays, and will also make it easier to get back on the wagon after the holidays. It's like, no, but I was doing all of those habits. I was, doing really well in November, early December, and like, let's get back on it. And I think that is the biggest thing more than anything that I have really had solidified to me in the last year, is that it does not matter if you're going to do something once a week or once every 2 weeks. The things that matter are the things that you can do most days or every day. And it's not about never failing. It's not about being perfect on a diet or with your sleep routine. And like, that's not going to happen. It's not about whether you fall off, because you're going to, but it's about just waking up the next day and being like, okay, let's get back to it. I ate terribly last night. I binge ate last night. Okay, whatever. We just get back to our regular eating plan today. No days wasted. It doesn't mean you have to spiral for the next week or two. It's just like, nope, next day you wake up, no shame, no guilt. You just get right back on the horse. And that, more than anything, is going to get you so much closer to where you want to be. Like, that is the thing that is most transformative, is consistency. Let me know down below if any of these 10 goals in particular stood out to you, resonated with you, and if you have any goals for yourself for the rest of the year. If you are doing the Great Lock-In or a winter arc this year, let me know. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you on the next one.